Hey guys, welcome back. Today is October 20. So I wanted to take some time today to talk to you guys about a few strategies that you guys can focus on during the pre-rut. Right now, the pre-rut is one of my absolute favorite times to be in the woods. And that's because a lot of times those older bucks that we're after, they've been somewhat reclusive up until this point in the season. But this is the time of year during the pre-rut that those older bucks move more consistently during daylight, giving us more hunting opportunities. The pre-rut along with the rut will start around the same time in your area or on your property every single season. Here in Michigan, on our properties, we're in mid-Michigan, we notice that the pre-rut kicks off around the 20th of October every year. Sometimes it's a little bit sooner, sometimes it's a little bit later, but it's right around the 20th of October here in mid-Michigan. So for those of you guys that have properties in the northern part of the country like Michigan, your pre-rut should be kicking off right now. For those of you guys that are a little bit further south, the pre-rut will be starting just a little bit later. In some years, we might witness more daylight pre-rut activity than others, and there are a lot of factors for that. Weather, hunting pressure, maybe the number of bucks or the age of the bucks on your property. But just understand that the pre-rut starts at the same time every single season for your area. And before we talk about our hunting strategies for the pre-rut, first I want to talk about what the deer are doing or what the bucks are doing right now during the pre-rut to help those hunting strategies make sense. And right now, to sum it up, what those bucks are doing is they are getting ready for the rut, pre-rut. Outside of staying alive, and depending on the buck, sometimes they even throw that one out the window. A buck's number one goal during the rut is to breed as many does as possible. So they need to be a very efficient breeder. So during the pre-rut, they're doing everything they can to make sure that during the rut, they're as efficient as they can be. The older bucks, they've been through the rut before. They've been through the breeding season before. They know that it's coming. And so they know this is the time of year that they need to get ready to make sure that they're as efficient as they can be when the rut kicks off. And a lot of times the older a buck is, the more efficient he is during the pre-rut, which makes him more predictable. So let's talk about a few things that the bucks are doing right now during the pre-rut to ensure that they have an efficient or a successful breeding season. And during the rut, the number one thing that those bucks are focused on are does. So during the pre-rut, that's what those bucks are also focused on. They're trying to figure out where these does are hanging out. What are those does doing? The bucks are keeping tabs on all the doe family groups in your area. They want to know where these does are spending time at any given time during the day. And where these does are during the morning and throughout most of the day are within those bedding areas, that thick cover. So these bucks, knowing that those does are in that thick cover, what they'll do is they will cruise or travel along the downwind side of that thick cover, of that bedding area, to scent check those does. And the reason that they're going on the downwind side is because they can scent check that entire area without having to snake their way through and check every individual doe. By cruising or traveling along the downwind side of those bedding areas, bucks can check every doe within that cover and tell which does are close to coming into estrus. The same is true for the afternoon. As those does get up from that thick cover, leave their bedding areas and they travel to those afternoon or destination food sources, the bucks know this as well. So they are also going to be traveling, cruising along the downwind side of those food sources to, again, scent check those does. They're keeping tabs on these does to try to figure out when is that first doe going to come into estrus. Just like the example with the bedding areas in the morning, in the afternoon, the buck, he doesn't have to expose himself in the open food plot. He can hang on the downwind side within the cover to scent check the does. Another thing the bucks are doing this time of year during the pre-rut is they are laying down a lot of sign. And I want to talk about two things that you're going to notice if you haven't already while you're in the deer woods. And that's you're going to start noticing scrapes and rubs. Let's start with rubs and how you can sometimes use those to predict the movement pattern of a buck. Now, me personally, I do not hunt over rubs. If I'm walking through the woods and I see a big rub, I'm not going to set up over it. To me, that's a lower probability sit. Rubs are awesome to find. What that tells us is a buck was there, right? A buck made that rub, but a lot of times bucks don't rub the same tree. And we don't even know why a buck made that particular rub. this time of year, there's a lot of aggression and frustration within the buck community. There are dominant bucks and subordinate bucks. And if you have a dominant buck that pushes out one of those weaker subordinate bucks, that buck might be pissed that he just got pushed out of there, and he might be laying down a lot of sign. He might make a lot of rubs in this area. And if you find that, you don't know why that buck made all that sign, and if you hunt over that, there's a good chance that deer's never going to come back because he just laid all that sign down because he was mad. So again, me personally, while I do like finding rubs, they tell me that there are bucks in the area, I'm not going to set up over a rub, again, because I don't know why that rub was made, and there's a lower probability that the buck is going to come back and start working the same tree. But sometimes you can use rubs to figure out the movement pattern of a buck. If you have a well-known travel corridor and you notice that there are several rubs along this corridor and they are all on the same side of the tree, then a lot of times you can figure out the direction that that buck is traveling and if that trail is his morning trail or his afternoon trail. For example, let's say that we have a food plot right here and we have a bedding area off behind the camera and there's a travel corridor connecting the two. If we have a lot of rubs that are facing the food plot, that is likely the trail that the buck is taking in the morning as he's leaving the food plot and traveling back to the bedding area. He's hitting those trees, rubbing those trees on his way back to bed, so those rubs will be on the food plot side of the tree. It would be the opposite if you're noticing those rubs are consistently on the other side of the trees. If you have that travel corridor connecting the bedding area to a food source and you're noticing several rubs in a row and those rubs are facing the bedding area, that is likely the trail that that buck is taking in the afternoon as he's leaving the bedding area and heading towards the food source. So if you guys do notice a pattern with the rubs, and I'm not saying go scout your whole property right now, don't do that, don't apply that unneeded pressure, but if you are walking to your stand and you're noticing a pattern with the rubs, a lot of times you can use that information to figure out what time of day a buck is using that particular trail. Another form of deer sign that you're going to see popping up all over the place if you haven't already are scrapes. And scrapes are something that you want to be paying close attention to. Those primary, perennial, or community scrapes. And there is a difference between different types of scrapes. You're going to have perennial scrapes, which are the scrapes that are in the same place, the same location, same tree, same licking branch every single season. And then you're also going to have random scrapes, scrapes that are in a different place, a different location every single season. And you want to be focusing again on those primary or perennial scrapes. The more you hunt an area or a property, the better you'll be able to figure out which scrapes are the primary scrapes and which ones are those random ones. Again, because they're going to start showing up in the same place every single year. The reason that we don't want to be hunting over those random scrapes is very similar to why I don't place a lot of weight in hunting over rubs. Bucks make a lot of sign this time of year, and we don't know why that random scrape was made. It could be the same scenario. It could be that a buck got pissed off for one reason or another, or maybe he's expressing dominance and he just made a big scrape. And if you hunt over that random scrape, you might be waiting for a long time because that buck is probably never going to come back. So again, focus on those scrapes that are in the same place every year. The reason that we want to focus on scrapes right now during the pre-rut is because scrapes are one of the main ways the deer herd communicates with one another. Most of the time when we think about scrapes, we're thinking about a buck hitting a licking branch and working the scrape, which is understandable because that's what we see. We see bucks working scrapes during the pre-rut and sometimes the rut, but scrapes are not just used by bucks. Scrapes are used by the entire deer herd for the entire year. Scrapes are used by fawns, they're used by does, young bucks, and older bucks. The entire deer herd uses scrapes to communicate with one another through scent. And the best analogy that I know of, and I use this every year, is the dog and the fire hydrant. If you take your dog for a walk, your dog always pees in the same spot, whether that's a bush, a fire hydrant, a telephone pole, they always pee in the same spot because they are communicating with the rest of the dogs in the neighborhood. All the dogs, they smell that same spot and then they pee on it to let them know who was there. And so your dog can get a lot of information by smelling that one spot. It's the same thing with scrapes. The entire deer herd leaves scent at these primary or perennial scrapes to communicate with the rest of the herd. And so right now in the deer woods, during the pre-rut, these bucks are spending extra time at these scrapes, working these scrapes, because they are trying to be as efficient of a breeder as they can be. And so they are trying to keep tabs on all the deer, whether that's other bucks in the area, they're letting other bucks know they're there, they're trying to keep tabs on the doe family groups, again, to try to figure out which does are gonna be coming into estrus and when. They wanna know what areas did they need to focus on to breed as many does as possible. Now, I will say that even with perennial scrapes, not all of those scrapes are hit during daylight hours. There is a difference between perennial scrapes. The scrapes that we want to be focusing on during the pre-rut are the scrapes that are within cover. A lot of times these are located near doe bedding areas, but they're within cover. They're not in the wide open. Those scrapes are most likely used at night. And I'll give you an example of one that's right behind me. So I've got a perennial scrape. I don't know if you can see it, but I've got a beech limb that's bracketed to a cedar post. Now, that's a great perennial scrape. It's good for inventory, but most of the time bucks are hitting that scrape at night. They rarely come out here in the wide open right by my house during the daytime. So that's a good inventory scrape, not so much a scrape that I want to hunt over, again, because it's in the wide open. I've got scrapes that are a little bit further back within cover that those bucks hit during daylight hours. So now that we know what these bucks are doing this time of year, during the pre-rut, hopefully that makes our hunting strategies make sense. And it's really not that complicated what we're doing. We're just trying to think like a buck. And right now, these bucks, they're trying to keep tabs on all these doe family groups. They're hitting these scrapes, they're working these scrapes a lot, they're cruising or traveling along the downwind side of where these does are at any given time during the day. So in the morning, we really like to hunt over those perennial or primary scrapes that are located just on the downwind side of doe bedding areas. And in the evening, we like to flip that, and we like to hunt those scrapes, those primary scrapes that are located on the downwind side of those staging food sources. So not really the destination food source, but the food source that they're going to hit before moving out to that destination food source. Remember, in cover. We don't want to be hunting over scrapes that are in the wide open. Hunt the scrapes that are within cover that those bucks are going to feel more comfortable working during daylight hours. So as the bucks are cruising along the downwind side of the areas that the does are at that time of day, there's a good chance they're going to hit that perennial scrape, and we'll be waiting along the downwind side of that scrape. Another good strategy that you guys should be focusing on during the pre-rut is hunting over water sources. And that's going to be even more so this year with how dry it's been. During the pre-rut, these bucks are putting on a lot of miles. They are a lot more active. They're going to get thirsty. And especially this year, again, because it's so dry, there's not a lot of available water. So if you do have available water on your property, place a premium on that location. And if you have a perennial scrape there and it's on the downwind side of where these does are, that is going to be one hot spot during the pre-rut. Another hunting strategy that I like to focus on during the pre-rut is I like to time my hunts to a rain event. If I see rain moving through the property, I try to get in the stand right before that rain ends. Rain washes scent away, and a lot of times, as soon as that rain moves through, those bucks are up on their feet working and freshening up those scrapes. Just like the rest of the hunting season, during the pre-rut, we really want to tie our hunts to cold fronts. We want to use the weather to help us predict those better hunting days. And I actually just put a video together for the Whitetail Partners YouTube channel on how you can use the weather to help predict those higher probability hunting days. So if you haven't yet, please head over to the Whitetail Partners YouTube channel and check out that video. It should help you predict those higher probability days to be in the woods. But that's going to do it for today's video, guys, on a few strategies for hunting the pre-rut. This is a great time of the year to be in the woods. I hope you guys have a successful season. Thank you again for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next video.